I hate my disabled mother. I'm not posting for advice. I'm just screaming into the void because I can't take this anymore. I hate my disabled mother. She underwent a surgery when I was 6 that resulted in debilitating chronic pain. I'm 20 now. I wish she had just died. Having no mother would be better than having to grow up caring for a disabled parent. If she had died, at least my dad could have moved on and found someone else. After the surgery, they put her on a shit ton of opioids and the pain just never went away, so boom, now she's dependent on the opioids and she needs them or the pain is so bad she does nothing but scream. Ask me how I know. In the first few years, she saw so many doctors and tried so many things and nothing worked. She even had this box the size of her fist implanted near the site to inject steroids periodically. Nothing worked. After draining their retirement savings, they couldn't afford to see more doctors. With the new regulations on opioids, she is now required to see a pain specialist to help her manage her pain in order to keep getting the only medicine that helps her. These sessions are $1,200 out of pocket. Nothing he's tried has worked, shocker, but guess what? She isn't allowed to look for another doctor now because she will be flagged for opioid shopping, as in they assume that she's hopping doctors in an attempt to find one who will prescribe her the evil opioids. So she is stuck with this guy. She doesn't qualify for disability because she isn't disabled enough or some shit. We grew up living like we were dirt poor because of her medical bills, despite my dad making pretty good money. I basically had no parents growing up because she would sleep for days at a time and my dad had to work 12 hours a day to make enough money to pay for her medical bills. The pain and isolation from being unable to do much beyond getting up to use the bathroom has made her borderline delusional. She's become emotionally manipulative. Her condition has transformed her from someone who has a lot of clutter to a hoarder. She is constantly buying things she doesn't need. The house is overrun by her shit. If you try to clean it or move it without her consent, she goes into orbit. If you try to get her consent, she says she can't talk about it right now because she's in too much pain, not to mention that she is only awake for every 2 days she sleeps. If you try to rearrange or clean anything of hers, she will lose it. If you try to tell her that we can't keep living like this, she says that everyone is ganging up on her and she doesn't want to hear it. She wants to be a part of things, but anything that she's involved in revolves around caring for her. Not to mention that she just can't do things some days and gets offended if you do them without her. I hate this and I hate her. I don't want to just run away and drop all contact with them. I work for my dad and I really love the job. But fuck, I can't work for him without being around her. He resents her. He still has to work these 10-12 hour days to make enough money to care for her.
Storytime about the most embarrassing moment working as a TSA agent. So I work for the TSA and have for a few years now. It's a good job overall. I'm underpaid, but the benefits are nice and I get overtime when I want it. Over a year ago, during the week leading up to Christmas, we had some really bad weather that delayed all the flights. I volunteered to stay late so that my coworkers could go home to their families. Most of the work was done anyway, so it was mostly just standing around waiting for the odd latecomer. I was working the AIT, the space tube thingy, when 3 passengers came up together, a middle-aged man, a middle-aged woman, and a teenage boy. Mom goes through, all is fine. Dad goes through, all is fine. Kid comes up, I get a good look at him. Hoodie, sweatpants, shortish hair, smooth face. I figure he's about 13, maybe 14. I hit the button, direct him to wait with me for a moment, and then gesture to the screen, which lit up his chest area. I tell him that I have to pat the area down. He's a little nervous. I figure that's because he's so young, this is probably his first time getting a pat down, but he says okay and I start the pat down. I do the left side of the chest and feel some moob, which catches me off guard because he didn't look chubby at all. I move to the right side of the chest, read what's on the hoodie, and it all clicks at once. The hoodie has the name of a local college on it. This is an adult, not a child. He's not wearing sweatpants, she is wearing yoga pants. She doesn't even know the couple that just came through. I look at her face, which is bright red, my hand's still on her boob, and I pull it back like I just got bit by a snake. I immediately call for my supervisor, who comes over and asks what's wrong, and I explain the situation to her. That's when my supervisor covers her mouth in what I believe is utter shock. After groping this woman that I thought was a boy, I call my supervisor over. I tell her the situation and she covers her mouth. At first, I thought she was absolutely mortified, but then I realized she's trying not to laugh. She takes a minute to pull herself together, tells me to go take a break, and finishes screening the passenger herself. Once that was done, I apologize to the passenger. She tells me it's fine, that it wasn't the first time she was mistaken for a boy, and she probably should have said something before I started touching her. I leave her alone and go talk to my supervisor to figure out how exactly fired I am. She tells me to calm down, that it was just an honest mistake, and that she has my back if the passenger files an official complaint, but that probably won't happen and I shouldn't be worried. That reassured me a little, but I still groped a woman and ruined Christmas, so I feel like an absolute monster. I swallow my shame and finish my shift, then I go to the airport proper to find some food because I just finished a 12-hour shift and there's no way I have energy to cook dinner. I saw my hapless victim sitting at her gate waiting for her flight. I went up to her to apologize again and saw that the flight had been delayed until morning. It was about 11 at night at this point. I apologized again, she says it's fine, and I asked her if she's planning to stay the whole night. She said she has to because all the hotels in the area are booked. I tell her that I'm getting some dinner and I offer to get her some food as well. After all, I already got to second base. I think it's only fair that I buy her dinner. She agrees and we go to one of the restaurants that's open late, get some food and start eating. She said she gets mistaken for a boy a lot and it's not a big deal. We ended up talking for a few hours before I finally told her that I had to get home and apologize again for the accidental molestation. She said that all is forgiven if I promise to take her on a real date when she gets back. I agreed, she gave me her number and I immediately started texting her when I got home. We kept talking until her flight finally left. When she got back, I picked her up at the airport and a few days later took her on a real date that I promised her. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary.
Story time about how I cheated on my husband, lied about getting pregnant, and left with all his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Oh, this is gonna be a good one, you guys. A little background, my husband and I met 2 years ago. And lucky for me, he's a wealthy plastic surgeon. So a little backstory. I actually met him because I wanted to get a nose job. I made an appointment in his office and I went. We actually hit it off right away, even though he's older than me and, wasn't the best looking. After the appointment, I decided I would get the nose job. A few days later, I get a phone call. Guess who it is? It's the wealthy plastic surgeon who I just saw. He asked me out on a date and I said yes, of course. By the way, at the time I was a sugar baby, so I had a few sugar daddies. I figured he would just become another sugar daddy. He took me out to the best restaurant in town, and you better believe I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. After my surgery, he would bring me food and was just really nice. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend and I decided to give him a chance. I even broke up with 2 sugar daddies to make space for him. That's when I asked my boyfriend for an allowance. He said of course. There's so much more to this story. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, I had asked him for an allowance. Of course he said yes and offered me $3,000 a month. I accepted even though it was on the low end. By the way, I still had 1 sugar daddy at this time. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I was pretty obsessed with the Kardashians. My goal in life is to look like Kim K. So now that I had a plastic surgeon boyfriend, I decided to ask him what other surgeries he thinks I could do. I already had my nose job. Now I definitely wanted to do some other stuff on my body. But when I told him, he got really upset. He said I didn't need to change anything about me and that I needed to stop looking for attention from other men. That's when I told him that would be totally impossible and that I definitely was going to keep my other sugar daddy. He totally flips out because he didn't know I had a sugar daddy. Then he asked me if I was actually in love with him. I told him that love would grow eventually, but that I really did like him. Then he started playing hard to get, like he wanted me to apologize and beg him, but I was not the type. So we ended up not speaking for a few weeks. Eventually he comes over to my apartment and asks me what surgeries I want to get done. And back to the surgery table I went. Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, oh yeah, and stole all of his money. Well, almost all of it. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So my plastic surgeon boyfriend decides to do more plastic surgery on me. But this time, it was free. We decided to get my bum done. Again, during the healing process, he was a total angel and brought me food and took care of me. Yeah, he was also paying for all of my bills and my rent this time, even though I still had a sugar daddy. And he knew it. A few months passed and he asked me to go to Italy with him. Of course I said yes. We stayed at a beautiful place in Tuscany and then he asked me to marry him. He had planned out this whole romantic dinner and of course I had to say yes, but on one condition, that I let go of my last sugar daddy. So I told him I would, although I actually did not. So we started planning my dream wedding. We finally got married and I moved into his mansion. Then he told me that I had to get pregnant right away. His excuse is that he's in his 50s and he really wants to have kids. I said I wanted to have a baby too, but I kept taking the pill. I mean, I am just not ready to have kids or to ruin my beautiful body. This is when my other sugar daddy started getting really annoyed because I never spent time with him. It was really hard being torn between 2 men. Part 4 is up. Part 4 about how I cheated on my husband, lied about being pregnant, and stole all of his money. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my sugar daddy was starting to get really annoyed at me because I never spent enough time with him. That's when I broke it to him that I was actually married. He totally flipped out, called me a user, cut me off, and blocked me from everything. So that meant I was not getting money from this sugar daddy at all. It meant I was totally dependent on my husband. Remember I said my husband wanted me to get pregnant? Well, I kept taking the pill because I didn't want to get pregnant, but my husband would ask me every single day how that was going. And I was like, it's going. I even started lying, saying that I was going to go to the baby doctor just to get myself checked, and I really wouldn't. Instead, I would go have lunch and shop. Around this time, an old sugar daddy of mine contacted me, who I still had a crush on. He was like super good looking. He offered me some money and asked me if I wanted to go on a few dates, so of course I said yes. I accepted because I really wanted to just separate myself financially from my husband. I didn't want to be dependent on him all the time. So when my husband was at work, I would go out on dates with this new sugar daddy. The sugar daddy wanted me to go on a trip with him, and I had to say no. He got really upset and started asking questions. Of course, I didn't tell him that I was married. married, but he started getting really suspicious. He also started to catch feelings really quick. Like, he always wanted to be with me. He would text me all the time. And that's when my husband finds a text message from the sugar daddy. I basically denied everything and I told him that I no longer had any sugar daddies, but my husband did not believe me. That's when he calls my sugar daddy from my phone and tells him to leave me alone. And the sugar daddy told him that only I could make that decision. So I basically had to cut off the sugar daddy right in front of my husband. My husband was like really angry at this time, so I was on my best behavior for the next few weeks. But after a few weeks, he was still really angry, so I realized I needed to start taking money out of the account that he gave me. So I started transferring money from his account to my account, and then from my account to another account at a different bank. And guess what? My husband did not notice one bit. He had several other accounts and investments and all this other stuff, so he never really noticed if anything went missing from that one account. After a few months, I had $50,000 in that bank account. I knew it wasn't enough, so I had to start taking more money out. And then a few months after that, I was at $120,000. I knew this was enough to get me a little house somewhere and just like basically live by myself. That's when I devised a whole plan. I would leave the country and buy myself a house. I even started looking for a real estate agent in other countries. But then the poo hit the fan. My husband found my pills and asked me if I was actually trying to get pregnant or not. Once again, I started lying and I told him that of course I wanted to have a baby with him. Then he insisted we go to the doctor together. That's when he found out that I had not gone to the doctor once. He told me that if I didn't want kids, we would have to get a divorce, so I told him that I didn't want kids. That's when I told him I wanted a divorce and that I only wanted half of his stuff. He started laughing in my face and left. I knew I had to act quick because it was a matter of time before he found out I stole all that money. The very next day, I booked a flight and left. He started blowing up my phone, asking me where I was, calling me. Then he started threatening me for taking all the money in the bank account and that he hired private investigators to find me. Now I'm considering going back to him, but I honestly don't know what to do. I got myself a cute little house and even found a new sugar daddy. But I know he's still looking for me. What should I do, you guys? I think I really messed up, you guys.